Not every science lesson begins with a specimen or a piece of equipment. This one starts with art. Let's take a minute to study the picture and see what you see. What do you think is the main subject? You think there's more than one? Who are the supporting players? Where's your eye drawn to? If you're like me, I think this red dress seems to be the center of attention. And yet her back is to us, so she can't be the main person here. Let's look at the child she's holding. What's going on there? Do you notice the red cheeks? This is referred to as flushed. If you say somebody has a flushed face, that means they're very pink. And it's their blood vessels below the skin have dilated. And that typically can signal either a strong emotion, like if you're blushing, it's sort of a similar thing, or it can also mean illness. So could we rule out either of those? Well, because the child's asleep and because it is in fact a child, it's likely probably not the strong emotion. Probably not that this child is embarrassed. So could we say that this child is ill? Possibly. I think it could be even likely. I think the other main character here is the gentleman all in black, who seems to be doing something with this little child's arm here, but also connected to this child. If we look at the name of the painting, the doctor, Jean-Louis Albert, carrying out an anti-variolic vaccination circa 1820. So that tells us something. So now there's a doctor on the scene, and before we were thinking, yes, there could be illness, that seems to give some credibility to that theory. And you might also ask, is the child sleeping? And I think, sure, it's a possibility, but there seems to be more going on here than just a sleeping child. There seems to be more concern shown by the people in this room, seem to be fairly focused on these two children. So I think we can determine it's not just two sleeping or one sleeping child. What about the other child? Can we see anything there? This child does not appear to be sleeping, nor flushed, probably held in its mother's arm. I think it looks like there's servants here. I think it's likely this woman is a servant. Less certain about this girl. She seems to be more beautifully dressed, so I'm guessing she's a family member. Can we determine where we are? Can we determine the place, the time period, even sort of the socioeconomic status of the people here in this picture? In terms of wealth, I think we can pretty much determine that yes, this is not your average room. Look at the curtains, the fact that they have floor covering, probably a carpet, the beautiful clothes that they're wearing. The clothing is also a great indication of the time period. We know when the painting was painted, it's circa around about 1820, so it can't be later than that. It could certainly be a historic piece for the time, but I don't think it is. I think it's contemporary. So if we knew more about clothing at that time period, we could tell sort of where we are in terms of location. Because clothing, like a lot of things, tends to be based on nationality, and also even beyond that, it can be regionally based. Obviously, all of the people in this painting, even this gentleman here outside, are Caucasian, so we're likely not in Africa or Asia. If we knew more about the furnishings, and again, the clothing or the time period, we could probably narrow this down to a continent, definitely, and even specifically a country. And again, we go back to the name of the piece, and we see that the doctor's name is French, and the painting is in the collection of the Louvre, which is a famous museum in France, so it's likely that this scene is set in France. Now, I don't know if you're wondering, as I was when I first saw this, what's going on. And again, if we look back at the name of the painting, it says that this doctor is carrying out an anti-variolic vaccination. Well, we know what vaccines are, right? Or vaccinations. It's when you get a shot at the doctor and that keeps you from getting certain diseases. Before we came up with, or before we figured out how to make vaccines, This antivariolic procedure kind of predates that. And it goes back into antiquity as far as we can tell. Definitely in Asia and in Africa, there was a procedure. People learned to infect themselves with a small amount of the disease from the sick people into the healthy people. And so even then they would get a disease, but typically they would get a much more mild case of the disease, and that would end up creating they didn't know this, but creates antibodies in your bloodstream, and those actually stay with you your entire life and protect you from getting the full-blown disease, which can really put your life at risk. So this is before sort of any widespread understanding about germs, because that doesn't come till about 30 years later with the work of people like Joseph Lister and Pasteur. But still, like I said, there's this understanding, and it goes back into pretty much into antiquity, that you can be protected by doing this procedure. And that seems to be what's going on here. If you would have taken a tiny bit of the infection from the sick person, in this case, this child, and infected the well child, it's likely that maybe all the people in the household were going to have this procedure done, or maybe they'd had it done prior, and now because this child is newly born into the family, they want to make sure that this child's protected too. This is likely smallpox, which, because of this kind of procedures and research, has, as far as we know, been eradicated from the planet so that people are not getting smallpox anymore. It's not possible. It's a terrible disease, and it had a pretty high mortality rate. If you got it, chances are that you could die. And so it was worth it to people to take a small risk of being infected by it to do something like this. If you're interested in adding these types of discussion to your classroom, I'll leave a link for you below. And if you're interested in curriculum or courses for your middle school science classroom, check out my website, EngagingScienceLabs.com.